The BJP has been spooked again, at least apparently. This time it's Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari who has allegedly been snooped upon. Reports of listening devices being found in Nitin Gadkari's bedroom have created a massive political storm. The BJP itself is completely split on the issue. While Nitin Gadkari himself has denied reports of his house and office being bugged, Rajnath Singh, the Home Minister too, has denied the allegations of snooping. He says there's no question of any comment since Gadkari himself has denied them. But there are some sections of the party that claim that Nitin Gadkari is being spied upon by foreign agencies.
Well, certainly we'd like to know the truth about it. And since what Nitin has said is not yes or no, but that is highly speculative. My own view is that there was a danger to all BJP top leaders around October. And if it had happened, it would have been around that time, the planting. I think the only cure is complete transparency. And yes, if you are a minister, then it's a very serious matter. But I don't think this happened when he was a minister.
Well, the Congress has jumped onto the controversy, saying it's a serious matter and reflects the Modi government's lack of faith in its own ministers. They're basically insinuating that this is an inside job with the highest powers of the government spying on its own ministers. The Congress has demanded that the matter be thoroughly investigated. The party has also asked the BJP to clarify on this issue in Parliament.
Well, it's a matter of serious nature, and I think a totally impartial inquiry should be held into this. I'm not an investigating agency, but the government of India should come out with facts. It concerns the security of a very important person of the Indian cabinet. And if this can happen to him, may God save.
Well, the controversy erupted after a newspaper media report claimed that high-powered listening devices were found in the bedroom of Nitin Gadkari's 13 Teenmurti Lane residence in New Delhi. The report also said that the discovery was accidental and the devices were of a high quality and a type normally used by Western agencies. This, of course, has not been corroborated independently. Just a few months ago, whistleblower Edward Snowden had, remember, claimed that the US spy agency, the National Security Agency, had the Bharatiya Janata Party under surveillance. It is not known if there are other BJP leaders too who were similarly spied upon, if at all. Well, how serious is the threat of other ministers' homes and offices similar being probably bugged? Deputy Editor Athir Khan spoke to former Intelligence Bureau Officer S.K. Gupta, who had carried out a debugging procedure when reports of President Pranab Mukherjee's office being bugged had emerged. Here's an expert take on the issue.
We have with us Mr. S.K. Gupta, former senior IB official and the person who had carried out debugging at Mr. Pranab Mukherjee's residence and officer. In the light of what has happened with Nitin Gadkari's residence, do you think there's reason to be alarmed and government should take up some steps?
देखिए, अगर कल को ये प्रूफ हो जाता है, if it is proved tomorrow कि yes, there was a device actually found from Mr. Nitin Gadkari's residence, then I think it has to be taken up very seriously. The government needs to plan countermeasures, and then there should be element of surprise while carrying out the countermeasures. If the government decides to carry out these countermeasures periodically, I am sure nothing will be detected unless the element of surprise is there. And a lot of planning is needed to carry out such checks with the sophisticated technology available in the international market.
So are you trying to say that at random the minister's residence and office should be checked by say some agency?
Definitely. At the moment, actually, to my knowledge, IB is carrying out actually such assignments. But only thing what I am trying to stress is that there should be element of surprise. Nobody should know which house or which office will be checked actually on which date. Then only it may be possible to detect if any such devices are considered there.
But sir, also there is a problem that if a particular person is not willing to go in for this check due to privacy or some other reason, then should it be made mandatory?
It should be made mandatory. If it is proved that that Gadkari's residence, the devices have been detected, I don't think actually there is an option. Because if it is an important government person, then he is actually the custodian of a confidential information of the government. Then it is mandatory actually on him to actually allow these countermeasures or these checks.
So what happens in other countries, you must be knowing, in US or say Russia? How do they go about securing their national security?
See, there could be two steps. First is to not to allow the device to go inside. So at the point actually when it is taken inside the residence or the office, it is checked actually by various means. And number two, to carry out the periodic actually that surprise checks at various places. The first thing is to deny actually once the device goes inside, it has already done some damage.
Thank you for speaking with Headlines today, Mr. Gupta, who's telling that it has become important in the wake of these reports in the past that government should take a proactive approach and should also make these checks mandatory. With camera person Manoj Sangwan, Arthur Khan in Delhi for Headlines Today.
Well, sir, there's no question about just how explosive the implications of this story are. The BJP's Nitin Gadkari has come out and said no bugs were found in all media reports. First, he said they were speculative, and then when pressure mounted, he actually denied the veracity of these reports. Joining me to discuss this issue and more importantly, to decide what the next step is, devoid of all the politics, what should the next step be? Because at the end of the day, let's all agree that this is a national security issue. If listening devices have been planted in the official residences of union ministers, it's a problem that concerns all of us. Joining us, we are privileged to have with us A.K. Verma, former chief of the Research and Analysis Wing and an intelligence expert in his own right, Dr. Ejaz Ilmi, member of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and Vivek Bansal, member and spokesperson of the Congress Party with us. Mr. Bansal, I'd like to come to you first. Your party has said that transparency is required at this time. There needs to be an independent inquiry into whether there are bugging devices in Nitin Gadkari's house and all ministers' houses at this time. Is that the Congress Party's position at this time?
Definitely, we want the truth, whatever the facts are, they should come out in public, and to assure the public that there's no serious security lapse. As far as the government is concerned, as far as the nation is concerned, definitely we would like to ensure that that independent inquiry and facts should come out before the people, and people should know what the facts are and who is behind all this.
Dr. Ilmi, one of the insinuations, Dr. Ilmi, one of the insinuations that has come out from this conversation is that it's possible that it is an external spying agency that's meddling, because that arises from the story that broke last year of the United States having been cleared to spy on the Bharatiya Janata Party. But there is another side, including people in the Congress, saying that it's possibly an inside job, and we're hearing two stories even from the BJP. Does the BJP have one categorical view on this story and what has happened?
Well, obviously the official view of the BJP is what Mr. Gadkari and the Home Minister said, that this is speculative and imaginary. I don't want to be a part of the Congress conspiracy theorist club and look at controversy which is basically a storm in a teacup and find a highly speculative, unsubstantiated, unverified, unproven, notional reports coming out. Yes, a media house has spoken about this, but
it's not the Congress making these allegations, Dr. Ilmi.
I'm agreeing with you. This story is part of the media.
Justice should not be. Perception is very important in a democracy, and that too in a democracy.
No, the
like
most
India.
important thing is it's not a political allegation.
We say that the veracity has been proved, but at the same time we would like that facts should come out. Everything should be crystal clear. People should know
because Dr. Ilmi, the perception is
it was not so.
The perception is that the BJP is embarrassed by this story and has decided not to be transparent about it. That's the perception at this point, and that's why nobody knows what the next step should be. What's wrong with having an independent inquiry?
This is the same perception which is part of the media story. It's a perception of a media story. Where's the veracity? Where's the truth? If a person like Mr. Gadkari was actually face bugging, he would have come out in the open, because it concerns him, it concerns the nation, it concerns the government also. The fact that he's denying it means that there were no devices found. If somebody is claiming, then he must come forward with the evidence.
So let's just be clear, Dr. Ilmi, you're saying categorically that no devices were found.
Evidence would be there once you institute an inquiry.
I want to bring in AK Verma in that case. Mr. Verma,
into it, definitely the facts
Mr.
will come
Verma,
out and
like most things these days, Mr. Verma, this is sort of boiled down into a sort of political fight. That happens with most things these days. As an expert, as an intelligence expert, and you've seen this sort of thing through your career, what do you think, what in your personal expert view, Mr. Verma, should happen now? Should there be an independent inquiry? Is Mr. Nitin Gadkari's denial that there are bugging devices there enough to completely close this case and just move on with our lives? Or is this important enough to stay with this and actually follow through with an inquiry, since it definitely pertains to national security?
Further course of action should depend on the evidence that comes up. If there is evidence brought out that there was indeed a bugging episode which took place, then in an investigation...
Which is why I'm asking, sir, how do we get that evidence? Because you've got Nitin Gadkari saying these media reports are speculative. So does that close the file? Where will that evidence come from?
I will ask you a counter question. If there is no evidence, how will you produce evidence?
Right.
So far there is no evidence. And if there is no evidence, what kind of inquiry can be held?
Do you think the Congress is right in saying there needs to be an extensive and independent inquiry, and that all ministers' houses should be swept for listening devices now?
So far as sweeping is concerned, that's all right. It should take place and it should be a normal process. But for holding an inquiry into this particular incident, we'll have to go by the facts, not by insinuations. So where are the facts? If the facts are there, either produced by the Congress party or by the second opinion people in the BJP, if there is some evidence, then on the basis of that evidence, further steps can be taken.
Dr. Ilmi, is the BJP willing to do that? I know, the media reports are not something that political parties go by, but considering the implications of this story, purely the implications of this story in this newspaper report, would the BJP, in the interests of transparency, which is something which is a paradigm which the Narendra Modi government has talked about a lot, especially during its election campaign, in the interests of national transparency, would it be willing to satisfy all and any questions about this particular issue, including the bugging of Nitin Gadkari's house?
That's like putting a question mark on the national security interests of various agencies who are supposed to handle these mechanisms.
Sure.
Why do you assume that these mechanisms are not in place? Why do you assume that the IB and other agencies who are responsible for this are not doing their job? It's apparent they must be doing their job. But in this scenario, if there was a complaint by Mr. Gadkari himself, and who's denying it, he's being vehement about his denial, and he's saying there was no bugging device found and there was no bugs in my house. So if you want to create a controversy and you want to manufacture a controversy, then there has to be some sort of veracity or evidence in terms of actual evidence or confirmation by the person involved. And I'm sure there must be a mechanism in place in the interest of the nation which various agencies must be looking at.
As far as I would like to say, that all speculation should be set at rest, and whatever controversy, and as you said, this BJP's, this government's paradigm was transparency. In the interest of larger interests of transparency, we don't say we don't say that it's 100% true, but to set everything at rest, what's the harm in instituting an inquiry? Or because national securities are also at stake, partially, if at all it is true.
No, that's the point
we say if it's 5%, 10%, if it's found to be true. So in the larger interest, in the interest of the security of this country, in the interest of the people maybe having some skepticism or apprehensions regarding it, they should be taken care of. They should be addressed
based on evidence, not on manufactured statements or manufactured allegations which the Congress party is indulging in.
No,
you have to have.
Let's get down to
evidence. When a whistleblower comes and what is the evidence at the prima facie?
Let's get down. No more innuendo. Let's get down to specifics now, Mr. Verma. If you were, and I'm asking you, this is totally hypothetically, if you were advising the government right now, if someone asked you for advice on what it needs to do right now, what advice would you give them? I mean, that evidence that you were talking about, I completely agree that we should speak on facts on this and not on innuendo, certainly not on media reports, but this is an important issue. What do you think the Modi government should do at this stage, faced with the implications of this story? Should it order an inquiry?
As a professional, I would say that first determine what is the evidence produced by anybody, and if that evidence comes, then hold an inquiry. If no evidence comes, then you cannot hold an inquiry into an illusion.
So you're saying that it would be appropriate if the BJP held some kind of an internal, informal inquiry into where this information came from? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Verma?
No, I'm saying that unless there is evidence which comes out
Yes.
publicly, in the public domain, there is no room for any inquiry.
You know, Dr. Ilmi, that's one of the points, because you've got people like Subramanian Swamy insinuating, you know, an American hand. You've got others talking about how there's no story at all. You yourself have just, you know, echoed that view that this is a manufactured story. So, given the implications of what is being insinuated, how does the Bharatiya Janata Party plan to satisfy concerns about this? Because this goes well beyond, I'm sure you will agree with me, you're a mature politician yourself, you know that this goes well beyond a tu-tu-me-me between the BJP and the Congress. This concerns Indians, because every Indian should be worried if the ministers they've voted to power have listening devices in their residences.
Every minister is also worried, and every government official is also worried that they are being bugged. But the fact is, you have to be bugged to say that I've been bugged and then order an inquiry. In this particular scenario, I'm pretty sure that in a nation of the kind we are in, we obviously have a mechanism which does sweeping, which understands the national implications. So why are we assuming that such measures are not taking place? It's only if you have a complaint. If you have a complaint,
always there. But despite that,
if I am bugged, I need to make a complaint that I've been bugged. Then can you have an inquiry? But without me complaining, without there being a bugging episode, how can an inquiry happen? Which is why the government is well within its right to say that we have nothing to do with it.
Right. Okay. The fight remains at this point of time. There are demands for a full inquiry, complete transparency on the issue. Nitin Gadkari has categorically denied that these reports are correct. At this point of time, the BJP says the matter is closed. It does not need to take any further action. Like Ejaz Ilmi just said, there are mechanisms in place to actually deal with this sort of thing. But several questions still remain. And let's make no mistake, this is something that concerns us all. If the people we've elected to power, sent to parliament, the people we've put in the hot seat of government are being listened into or spied upon by anybody outside or inside, it's a story that concerns us all, and we'll be tracking it very closely here on Headlines today. Mr. Verma, Dr. Ilmi and Vivek Bansal, thank you very much for joining us on this discussion.